All right, welcome back, everyone. In this episode of We Rise Fighting Labor podcast, we take on the issue of conspiracy theories. We're putting some questions out there for your consideration, for the consideration of anyone who may be exposed to or entertaining or engaged with a conspiracy theory. That's why we put this episode together, to discuss those and put some questions out there about conspiracy theories. So we put this episode together because we understand this is a pretty turbulent world and people are looking for some sort of political understanding, some answers as to what's going on in the world. So in other words, they're looking for ideas that explain politics, ideas that explain economics, personal struggle, world history, social relations, current events, war, the role of the state and government, the role of corporations and CEOs, stuff like that. People are looking for answers because, again, it's a pretty turbulent world, so it's understandable. And they're searching for theories because people need a sense of hope and a sense of political direction. Because once you get some kind of understanding from a theory, this can lead to direction. This can lead to political direction, political activism, political change. So that's why these questions are important. And ideally, we find a theory that we can apply to the world and have it reflect our daily material reality, all right? So it holds water. So we go to work and the theory will reflect our material reality. We walk into a social situation, the theory can reflect material reality. So that's some of the tests conspiracy theories have to withstand. And so that, again, is the point of today's show, is to put some questions out there to see if a conspiracy theory withstands it. Okay, so we're getting into that, and we're getting into that again because these conspiracy theories are growing in popularity, especially during that moment of COVID there. We saw conspiracy theories grow a great deal. And the point of this program is not to cover every conspiracy theory that's out there, but again, put out some general questions that challenge conspiracy theories in general, or that any theory should be able to withstand. So we're going to get into all that, Brian. I'm pretty excited about this. This has been a subject that we've been talking about for a while because we've all had some personal experiences with conspiracy theories. For me, sometimes they've been confusing conversations. Sometimes they've been frustrating conversations, but whatever the case may be, let's address the merits of the argument and let's engage in the dialectic here.
Yeah, Rick, this is reminds me of Malcolm X. Brother Malcolm used to always give his speeches. He'd talk about you got to be careful when you read the newspapers and the TV, and today, of course, social media, which can be quite a minefield. And he would always give raps, Malcolm X that is, such as, you got to be careful. You got to do some research because otherwise you'd be thinking your friends are enemies and your enemies are your friends. And who's really profiting off of us and who's really exploiting us and who's really oppressing us. And what conspiracy theories do, of course, is take the spotlight off of who the real enemies are in terms of this show, We Rise Fighting and Labor, and putting that spotlight on who we need to focus on, the bosses and the bankers. But we'll get into that more. And thanks, Rick, for raising this. And this is a continual discussion as we move forward. And we're going to dig deeper with conspiracy theories, and of course, as our listeners are interested also in some Marxian economics. All right, Rick.
Yeah, you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that because, when we get ready for these shows, we put some notes together, a Google Doc, and just share some notes and look over stuff. And on there, I had thought about talking about the Blair Witch Project, Brian, just because, we're both fans of horror and this is a subject. And that just came to mind, and I'm not prepared to go in depth into this, but that just came to my mind because for folks who have seen the Blair Witch Project, or for folks who were alive when the Blair Witch Project was out, that was a monumental movie. Surely it was entertaining, and it was a great idea, and it was cool in the sense that they did it on such a low budget. They did it all in the woods and all that stuff. But it was presented as, what was it now? Was it lost footage or something like that? And the end result was that this movie helped blur the distinction between documentary and entertainment. And I feel like the entertainment industry, and now with YouTube, never really fully recovered from that. You jump on YouTube and it's real easy to get into some conspiracy theories real quick on there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it took me back to, I love that movie though. I love me some Blair Witch Project, but it may have left that mark in history.
That's right.
So, we're gonna take a second here. We're gonna go ahead and listen to this video reel that I just got in my reels just a couple of nights ago before doing this show. Probably because I don't know, the algorithms picked up on some key words and decided to present this to me. But here, check this out. Listen to this reel real quick because it contains some of the characteristics that we would like to talk about today. So check this out real quick and we'll get back to you.
We all know that Antarctica is the most mysterious and intriguing continent that exists. Recently, an incredible theory has been spreading and could completely change our perception of this territory. According to this theory, Antarctica is not a vast expanse of ice at the bottom of the Earth, but rather a gigantic wall of ice surrounding all the continents of this world. Some even believe that if we were able to cross this ice wall, we would discover other continents that have intentionally been kept hidden from us. In 1992, a new standard world map called the Gleason map was published, depicting Antarctica encircling all our continents. A very intriguing fact is that the logo of the United Nations strongly resembles this map. A pilot took the risk of going there despite the prohibitions and released a low-quality video claiming to have reached this ice wall. But we cannot be sure if it is truly Antarctica or if it is staged.
All right, welcome back. So from listening to that reel, and also just from my own personal experiences and observations, one of the things that conspiracy theories seem to have in common is that many presume intent. All right, so many assume that there's like a small group of people, looking to do harm, like actively looking to do harm, actively looking to control things, if you will. So, for instance, the Illuminati or QAnon, talking about Satanists and child molesters and stuff like that, right? So, often enough, conspiracy theories start there. That's their entry point into their own theory, is that there's an evil horde of people looking to control things. Now, right off the bat, the difficulty with that is that exactly how do you define evil? And number two, what does it matter to me? As we're about to get into, that's not the social relation that I'm interested in. All right, that's a description of a person, and I don't know what use it has, knowing that you think they're evil or something like that, but that isn't so useful to me in formulating a political understanding, much less in formulating political direction. And then, of course, coupled with that or close to that are some anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And I'd like to share my own experience when I worked at UPS in Detroit, in the suburbs of Detroit. On one occasion, and I was a truck loader, and on one occasion, I was in the lunchroom, right? I was on union break, just chilling and being cool. And I start talking to a fellow worker, and we hit it off right off the bat, right? Like I was there talking about the union. At that time in particular, I was talking up the reform candidate. His name was Tom Leadham. And so we were talking about that, and we're agreeing on things, and we're both on the same page, right? We need to organize. Yeah. Workers need power. Yeah. There's a small minority of people who control the vast majority of wealth on the planet, and we need to change that. Yeah. Yeah. And in my head, I'm thinking it's the capitalists, it's the CEOs, it's the shareholders. And my coworker turns around, he says, and you know who it is, right? I'm like, yeah. And he says to me, it's the Jews. Oh, dear Lord. That certainly wrecked the conversation. But again, going back to, this small group of people who are evil, who presume, I'm not interested in that social relation. We're not interested in that social. It tells us nothing. It tells us the ethnic identity of the owner of a company. And listen to that, the owner of the company, owner of the I'm interested in that. That is the social relation that I'm interested in, because that tells me who's going to hire me, who's going to have me in their workplace for 40, 50, 60, 80 hours a week. That tells me who's going to profit off of my labor. That tells me who is down to exploit me as a worker, as part of the working class. That tells me a lot more. That tells me that they are interested in profits. That tells me they're interested in my surplus value. That also tells me that if I want to fight back against that type of exploitation, that my defense is a strike, that my defense is direct workplace action. That's what that social relationship tells me. So to hear that it's Illuminati, to hear that it's Satanists, to hear that it's Jews, that tells me absolutely nothing. I could care less, to be quite frank. And it's everything from anti-Semitic to misguided to offering no value, no political theoretical value. So that's part of the list of people who's out there. That's part of the list of tiny minority evil horde group of people who's out there. You know, that's right next to the liars at NASA for flat earthers. That's right next to the 9/11 conspiracy theories and the COVID conspiracy theories. You know, they all have small groups of people who are responsible for some of the ills in society. And again, we are the opinion that there are specific social relations that we are interested in that give us guidance, that give us some understanding, some analysis, some direction politically, so we can change the world, so we can change the community around us, all that, right? And hearing that someone is Jewish or Muslim or Catholic or Christian or, any of these things isn't useful in that endeavor. And another common characteristic of conspiracy theories is that they take facts and ideas that we can all agree on and they glue them together with mystique, with metaphysics, with divine rights of kings or divine rights of capitalists, if you will. They also glue facts together with religion, or in the case of 9/11 conspiracy theories and COVID conspiracy theorists, they often glue them together with pseudoscience. Another thing that's used to bring these facts together, if you will, is passive sentences. Now, Brian, I am not a grammar nerd. Grammar is, I appreciate that I was taught all the grammar that I was taught, but for me, grammar really flew out the window once I discovered my own style. However, passive sentences, in other words, sentences where you can't identify a subject, those I really cannot tolerate, because when you ask the question, who is doing the action, they don't have an answer. So, for instance, in conspiracy theories and in the reel that you just heard, for instance, the reel starts off, it is widely understood. Well, conspiracy theories start off like that often enough. It is widely understood that evil has always existed. When that's your entry point into any kind of theory, you're already building a foundation on sand because you're starting with the passive sentences. That type of statement begs more questions than it answers. And so that's another characteristic of conspiracy that we often see in conspiracy theories. So again, to recap, conspiracy theories presume intent, that there's intention coming from a small group of people, being the second one. That's a second characteristic. There's a small group of people who want to control, who want to hoard the, like it's a character reference or an ethnic reference or something like that. So conspiracy theories presume intent, believe in a small group of people who, want to control things. They base their arguments around passive sentences and they're growing in popularity. So again, this is why we're putting some of these things out there. And this is why we're also going to compare it again to another type of study, which would be Marxian economics and Marxist economic theory. And the way we'd like to do this comparison is by first stating that the difference here is that Marxism is a systemic critique of capitalism rooted in the material dialectic. All right, now let's break that down. Let's break down what I just said just real quick. All right, Marxism is a systemic critique of capitalism rooted in the material dialectic. What does that mean? Now, let's take it apart. By material, we mean this tangible world, this world that we can touch, feel, connect with our five senses, make some sense of, understand, change, reason in. All right. And how do we reason? We reason through the dialectic. We present ourselves with an argument or a thesis, and we present ourselves with a counter argument or a counter thesis. And we let these ideas, these theses and these antitheses battle it out until they reach a synthesis. In other words, a conclusion. So that is how Marxism creates a systemic critique of capitalism. It's rooted in this here material world, so there's no mystique around it. There's no mystery around it. There's no metaphysics around it. And we reason in this here material world using the dialectics, right? So we reason by thinking back and forth, by discussion, by having one argument and a counter argument and reaching a conclusion. And when you apply this, when you apply the material dialectic to history and society, you can begin to ask questions like, who built this house? Who built this computer? Who built this street? Who built this city? Who built this society? Over and over and over throughout history, including this current world. Who built this? Who built the house that I'm sitting in right now, the desk that my computer is resting on right now, the headphones that I'm using to record this podcast? Who built all this stuff? This was done by workers. And from that point, you can start to untangle a series of social relations, right? Like if you go through history, you can start to untangle the social relation between a serf and a lord, right? A serf in feudal times would labor, and any surplus value that the serf created would be taken by the lord. Under slave society, when a slave labored, all the surplus value that a slave created was taken by the slave master. And let me pause here for a second, because some folks may not be familiar with surplus value. What is surplus value? Surplus value is the value that's created by workers or producers in a society that goes above and beyond whatever is needed for themselves to survive. Okay, so for instance, in any workplace, at a certain moment in the day, the workers can say that they've reached that point, that they've created the equivalent value that they need to survive. And everything above that, all the surplus labor above that, is creating surplus value that then in this society gets taken by the capitalists, gets taken by capitalists in the form of revenues, in the form of profits, in the form of dividends. So when we start to look back and ask questions like who built these houses, who built the street, who built the city, who built everything around us, again, we start to untangle these social relations. And again, if we look at today's society, we look at a capitalist society where the capitalist is the ruling class, and the working class, the workers, are producers in society, and they create all the wealth, they create all the value, including the surplus value that these capitalists are interested in. Now, there's no need for conspiracy theory on this, right? Because these capitalists, these billionaires and these millionaires and these company owners, they put themselves on the cover of magazines. We don't have to search for this secret document that was written 300 years ago. And I don't know, man, all this wild stuff, right? Like Excalibur being pulled out of, we don't need explanations and metaphysics like that. These people put themselves on the cover of Forbes, Money Magazine, Business Week, Bloomberg Magazine, Fortune Magazine, the Wall Street Journal. These people put themselves on the cover of these magazines and very explicitly tell us that they are society's billionaires. Do they present themselves in a negative light? Of course not. They present themselves as philanthropists. So we identify with them so that we can say to ourselves, oh man, one day I'm going to be a billionaire, but I'm going to be a good billionaire. I'm going to give away a lot of my fortune to help the homeless, for instance. And beyond that, all the information that we need to carry out political and economic exposures of the capitalist ruling class is already public. It's in the documents that corporations submit to the Security and Exchange Commission, the Security and Exchange Commission being the government agency that maintains corporate records. So corporations submit their financial records to the Security and Exchange Commission, and they also have it on their own website and the investor relations website for any corporation. They have these documents out there. These documents tell you profits. These documents tell you revenues. These documents tell you about ownership, tells you about shareholders, tells you about international presence, tells you about the facilities they own, the fleets they own, the properties they own, everything. All this stuff is out there and it's public information. It's public record that we can use and not have to ask anyone for permission. These are the documents, be it an annual report, be it a corporate 10K, a proxy statement, a press release. These are the documents that are looked at and referred to by journalists, by historians, by shareholders, by potential investors, by market analysts. These are the documents that can serve to expose, because all the damning information that we need to carry out economic and political exposures, that's out there. It's public record. We're just not taught to look at these public records. These conspiracy theories have become more accessible, more easily accessible than being able to go into the website of a government agency and looking up corporate profits, for instance. I think people have an easier time finding a conspiracy theory online than navigating through the investor relations website of any corporation, finding the corporation's annual report to its own shareholders, finding a corporation's 10K report to the Security and Exchange Commission, finding a corporation's proxy statement, finding a corporation's press releases, and all that information. I think it's a lot easier to stumble upon a conspiracy theory on YouTube rather than all these documents. But that's part of the reason for having this show and for focusing on this today, is to let y'all know that all those documents I just listed, they're available on the investor relations website of any corporation. And again, these documents will tell you corporate profits. They call them net income. They'll tell you about corporate revenues. They'll tell you about the CEOs, who they are, what their names are, their ages, where they came from, where they worked before, what candidates and what political causes do they give to. That's also out there. You know, this information is maintained by the Federal and Elections Commission. You know, unions, for instance, and corporations, they use political action committees to give and receive political contributions. You know, that's how this game works. You need a political action committee to be able to track political money. So if you jump on the Federal Elections Commission website, for instance, you'll be able to find this information. You'll be able to see who is contributing to a political action committee. You'll be able to see, for instance, if, let's just say, for example, if Amazon, their political action committee, you can see all the employees of Amazon and all the CEOs of Amazon who contributed to the political action committee. And from there, you can also see all the contributions made by the Amazon Political Action Committee to different candidates, to different political causes. You know, again, this is all public record and it's already damning enough. We don't need conspiracy theories. We don't need mystique. We don't need mystery or metaphysics. All this stuff is out there. Information on shareholders, potential shareholders, CEOs, it's all out there. And in saying all this, is the information all correct and accurate? You know, because I feel that's a question that I've stumbled upon as a researcher. You know, someone questioning my research. Is all the information that we gather from investor relation websites, from all these documents that I've listed, is all that information correct and accurate? I think it would be foolish to presume that it is. You know, these are corporations that we're talking about, shareholders and CEOs who are interested in making profit, you know, by any means. And so, no, I don't think it's completely accurate. but it is official public record, and it is coming directly from the horse's mouth. In other words, it's coming directly from the corporation. And again, it's already damning enough. When you start to read about the obscene levels of profits, when you start to read about the obscene level of revenues that are generated by the workers of a corporation, and you compare and you contrast numbers like that to the hourly wages made by the workers, the information is damning enough. We don't need to create something. This information is out there. So we put this podcast together today to bring that point home, to put some questions out there that could challenge the typical conspiracy theory and also give you something to grab onto as far as a political theory. Because I think that the strength of Marxism and other political theories, but for me, Marxism, I think the strength of it is in the material dialectics. That tells us where we're starting our analysis from. That tells us where we're starting our understanding from. We're rooted here in this material world. We are reasoning like this. And when we apply this, when we apply the material dialectic to history, when we apply the historical dialectic, if you will, we are able to untangle these social relations and understand what's going on in society. So again, we don't need conspiracy theories.
Yeah, Rick. Well, I have a general question for you to start with. That we talk a lot here on We Rise Fighting about labor news and organizing and supporting unions and workers. And how does this relate to you when you think about the question of power? Oftentimes, in organizing, there can be side conversations about conspiracy theories, or maybe this is happening, or maybe that's happening. But at the end of the day, it's always a question about power. Who doesn't have power, and who has power? How, in your view, how does this relate to the some of what you laid out here?
Well, I think that's a point of formulating any political theory, right? Is to get some sort of direction so as to advance the power of the oppressed, if you will. In this case, we are the working class, under capitalism. And if we are looking to gain power, if we're looking for liberation, if we're looking to undo the social injustices around us, we need some clear direction. And we need to know who holds the power and what those social relations are. To me, it doesn't tell me anything that a person is, again, Jewish or anything like that. Like, to me, again, it's more important to know that they're the owner of a corporation or the owner of a company, because that lets me unravel a strategy as to how to counter their interests, right? Their interests are profit. So for me, what I can figure out from that is, well, how do I disrupt those profits? Well, we can strike. Well, we can boycott. Well, we can organize a union, stuff like that. And that to me results in more power. If we stop the theory at the ethnicity of a person, I don't know what that tells me. I don't know what to do with that. And honestly, yeah, Brian, you and I have been talking about this. And when you tease that out, what does it tell us exactly? Either you're going to hit a brick wall and you're going to run out of answers, or your answer is going to be something like genocide. And that, I think that is the dangerous part about a lot of conspiracy theories, is that when you boil it down, you've created a scapegoat. And what do you do with scapegoats? You eliminate them. That's genocide. So that's the real danger, to make it real serious now. That's the real danger in conspiracy theories, I think, in that they're misguided and they point to things like that. Also, I think that it's misguided to even consider some of those identities, right? Because so what? So they're Jews. So what? So they're Catholics. So what? So they're Muslims. So what? A theory needs to be able to do away with oppression and oppressors altogether. The point of the theory isn't to become the new oppressors. I'm Latino, I'm Salvadoran. I don't want to become the new Salvadoran oppressor. I don't want to become the new Salvadoran exploiter. I want to do away with oppression and exploitation altogether. And that's not something that conspiracy theories are equipped to do. They're equipped to find a scapegoat. But as far as identifying the social relations that are important to us for the elimination of oppression and exploitation, no, they fall short.
That's right. So what I'm hearing you saying is in every phenomenon, we have to look at what are the class interests of either side on the barricades. Are you a boss? Are you exploiter? Or are you a worker?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, because again, here on my desk, right, looking at a pen right now, and we've had this mental exercise before. When you consider all the labor that's congealed in any commodity, right? Right now, for instance, it's this pen. This pen has plastic parts. This pen has metal parts, rubber parts. It has ink. It's been painted a certain color. It has a logo on the side. So we can consider all the labor that's congealed in this. The metal had to have been extracted, maybe as iron ore in a mine. The plastic could have started as petroleum, the rubber, because it has a little grip. The rubber could have, started with a rubber tree. But all that labor is congealed in this pen, right? And when we start thinking about all the labor that's congealed in here, we start talking about, again, the mine worker, the oil rig worker, the rubber plant worker. We start talking about that. And again, like you just said, we start unraveling all these social relations because every single worker, all the hands that went into the creation of this pen, every single worker has that social relation. And that, I think, is more useful to us than the ethnicity of every single owner, the ethnicity of every single boss along the lines of production that brought me this pen to my desk. I think that's the important social relation, because with that, we can formulate strategy. With that, we can formulate an understanding, we can organize, we can undo those injustices. So yeah, so that's what's up, and that's what tonight's episode was about. It was about conspiracy theories, putting some questions or observations out there for your consideration. Maybe they challenge a theory that you've embraced or that you've been considering, and these new questions, maybe they'll throw a wrench in that. And if they throw a wrench in that, well, maybe it speaks to some of the limitations of that theory, or that it wasn't a good theory to begin with. A good theory you can take out into this here material world and apply it and make sense of the world and keep making sense of the world. You don't encounter speed bumps like, oh, it's the Christians, it's the Jews, it's the Muslims, you don't encounter bumps like that in the road. So we hope that we've given you something to consider tonight, some ideas to consider, some stuff to look up for yourselves if you'd like. Again, to really reiterate, a lot of the information that you're looking for is in the investor relations website of any corporation. All their public documents are on there. All the profits, all the owners, all the shareholders, the history of profits, the history of the revenues, all that stuff is the history of its ownership. All that stuff is on there. So we don't need to jump into YouTube and just kind of take a leap of faith on some random person on YouTube, gutting out or ditching out some conspiracy theory, taking some facts that we know to be true and gluing them together with metaphysics or mystique or fiction or anything like that. Because, these are questions really of life and death, as we're seeing right now, even in current events, for instance. We're starting to see this struggle between the Teamsters and UPS. And as I said in the last podcast, and as I have been saying, we've been saying on this podcast, this UPS contract is a big deal. It's the largest private company contract in North America, union contract in North America. And so, yeah, we are about to enter into a power struggle. We are in the midst of a power struggle right now as they're in negotiations. But if this comes to a strike on July 31st, it'll be a real power struggle. It'll be a power struggle on the street. And we need to be able to make sense of that. So we need theories that make sense of that for us. Conspiracy theories will not make sense of something like a strike of 340,000 people. A conspiracy theory will not hold water in explaining something like that. So Brian, tell us what's going on with the Teamsters. What's the update with negotiations and the strike? Because strike date is looming.
Yeah, Rick, I'm not updated on the particulars of the some of the negotiations. Of course, some of the nature of that is internal, but essentially these issues have been surrounding around part-time work, wages, of course, two-tier wages, safety issues. Some trucks, they just want an air conditioning. It's hard to believe, but in the summer of 2023, they finally won some demands for air conditioning, as well as parity on pay and related issues. But the most important thing right now for listeners is to that we're encouraging listeners is to get ready for the strike. And this is going up against UPS, the Teamsters potentially. The contract expires at midnight, July 31st. But of course, UPS cannot survive without the bankers and without other corporations. So the Teamsters are not just going up against UPS, but they're going up against the entire network that UPS bosses are connected to. And all this is essentially a gargantuan battle of the working class and oppressed people in this country and really around the world against UPS, a multi-billion-dollar company that has gotten even richer during the pandemic. And of course, those profits have not gone to the workers as they should have. So there are a lot of activities taking place with the Teamsters. There's what we're calling informational pickets or practice strikes. What they're doing, locals around the country that at UPS loading facilities and other places, having rallies early in the morning at shift changes, and the communities are more than welcome. Fellow union members that are members of other different unions, community supporters are encouraged to come down with saying something like, my union supports the Teamsters, or my community organization, my faith-based organization supports the Teamsters. They're also asking for resolutions to be passed in your organization. So a groundswell of support is on paper. So when the media comes up and says and tries to lie about the support, we can say that we have hundreds or thousands of organizations that support our fellow workers, the Teamsters, on strike at UPS. And that includes also student organizations as well, and all those in support of the workers there at the Teamsters. The other thing is getting the strike ready materials. This is a gargantuan task, and sometimes you see a picket line on TV or social media, and it looks great. Folks are wearing T-shirts. The picket signs look great. The banners look great. But as Rick just mentioned about the pen, that takes work. To put all of those banners together, and those signs have to be transported. They have to be dropped off. It's really hot. The strike could be hot, so water would be needed. Snacks would be needed. So we're encouraging listeners to contact your local Teamsters, wherever you may be, and check in with them and see what they need. Because some locals are bigger than others. Some have thousands of members. Some only have hundreds. There might be rural locations where there's just one building with a few Teamsters that check in every day. So it's a wide gamut on the numbers out there, what a local size might be, but support is absolutely needed everywhere. So if you're an organization that can make a banner, can help make signs, could be on the picket line to support in all kinds of different ways, your local Teamsters will be more than happy to help providing the information that's needed in the local area on how community and labor can support. But it's instrumental that happens. A strike is very challenging for one day, much less a longer period of time. As we saw, we supported here at We Rise Fighting the UAW 180 strike in Racine, Wisconsin, and that was a gargantuan effort of 700 to 800 workers, and there was 3 different picket shifts every day, or 2 sometimes, multiple workers. It takes a lot of work to run a strike, so they're going to need every bit of support that we can lend them. And the DSA, as Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA have strike support materials, as does the Teamsters on their social media and Facebook pages. And also, there are a variety of different organizations across the country that are putting up solidarity signs on lawns, on your, if there's a coffee shop or a business that's pro-labor, ask them to put up a "We Support Teamsters" sign. So any and all support for the Teamsters at UPS is the order of the day right now. This strike could turn the tide not only for the workers at UPS, but also for us as workers across this country. And wouldn't it be something, Rick, if we could have I'm sure this will happen in every location, but the Starbucks workers out there, Teamsters wearing Starbucks Workers United t-shirts and vice versa, and labor out there, different unions,
Graduate workers,
picket
yeah.
lines, graduate workers making noise, doing what we did in Racine too, is we put signs on top of people's cars in the spirit of the 1930s flying squadrons. We could have the picket signs up and then cars going through the communities making noise like Black Lives Matter protests did. So all kinds of creative actions could come to the fore and are going to be needed this month to practice them. And then if the Teamsters go out on August 1st, we will be there in solidarity all over the country, bolstering and doing whatever we need to win this struggle and a just contract at UPS for the Teamsters.
No doubt. This is really exciting. I was just telling a friend the other day, just briefly about the Teamsters and what's going on. And, they don't really follow labor that much. So just some basic stuff. But I was also telling them, hey, the Teamsters have been pulling off strikes, in preparation for this. They've been getting active and they've been, again, having strikes, but also organizing rallies for UPS workers, for Teamster members. So, yeah, they've been rolling up their sleeve and, again, to tease it out, right, in the spirit of teasing out the lines of production and all that stuff, this type of contract, this is 340,000 workers. This type of contract will set a standard as far as wages, workplace conditions, benefits. It will set standards for other union work sites. It will set standards for non-union work sites. And it will set standards, for instance, for Amazon, right? Because that's another place where the Teamsters are looking to organize and have been active in. So again, this is not conspiracy theory. We don't need conspiracy theories. There's economic interests. There's profits. There's shareholder dividends. There's the relationship between the shareholder and the worker, between the CEO and the worker. That tells us more than the CEO is X religion or X ethnic background. That tells us more than anything. The fact that they're owners, the fact that they're CEOs, shareholders, that is the important part. So thank you for listening today. Thank you for tuning in always to We Rise Fighting. We hope you find these conversations very useful. And if you do, that you share them, that you talk about them, that you post them or tag us or anything like that. We do appreciate that. We will be coming back to you with the news sometime soon, but we also do enjoy doing these types of special episodes because it gives us a reason to explore a certain subject and just educate ourselves. So thank you again, everyone, for listening. We hope you're all well. Solidarity and love to all. We'll be in touch soon. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.
All right.